hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon.
My daughter threw my house keys on the counter like she owned the place and music. Announced that she expected breakfast ready at 5 a.m. tomorrow for her new husband, Music, who likes everything his way. 24 hours later, I was setting their alarm for 4 a.m. But the surprise I had planned for their morning coffee was going to give them a wake-up call they'd never forget. Let me tell you how we got to that moment, because what happened next changed everything. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. My name is Patricia Whitmore, and at 52, I thought I'd seen every possible way my daughter could disappoint me. Boy, was I wrong about that. It was a Tuesday in late August when Sophia showed up at my Malibu beach house with her brand new husband, Derek, 3 massive suitcases, and an attitude that could have powered the entire Pacific Coast Highway. I was enjoying my morning coffee on the deck, watching the waves roll in, when I heard a car door slam hard enough to wake the dead. Through the glass doors, I could see my 28-year-old daughter marching up the wooden steps with a man I'd never met trailing behind her like a well-dressed shadow. "Mom," she called out, not bothering to knock before pushing through my front door. "We're here." Here for what exactly? I hadn't invited anyone. The last time we'd spoken was 3 weeks ago when she'd hung up on me for suggesting that getting married to someone she'd known for 6 months might be a bit hasty. "Sophia," I said, walking in from the deck with my coffee still in hand. What a surprise! She was already dragging luggage toward the guest staircase, her new husband standing awkwardly by the door like he wasn't sure he was supposed to be there. Smart man. I thought he shouldn't be. "Derek, this is my mother, Patricia." "Mom, this is Derek, my husband." She said it with that emphasis people use when they want to make sure you understand they've made a life-changing decision without consulting you. Derek stepped forward with what I had to admit was a charming smile and extended his hand. "Mrs. Whitmore, it's wonderful to finally meet you. Sophia talks about this place constantly." "Does she?" I shook his hand, noting the expensive watch and the custom-tailored shirt. "And what brings you both to my little sanctuary, unannounced?" "We're on our honeymoon," Sophia announced as if that explained everything. "We wanted somewhere peaceful and private. Plus, hotels are so impersonal, don't you think?" I looked around my living room, which was definitely not set up for unexpected house guests. My yoga mat was still rolled out from my morning routine. There were paintbrushes soaking in a coffee mug from yesterday's art session, and my latest romance novel was face down on the couch right where I'd left it. "How long were you thinking of staying?" I asked, though I suspected I wasn't going to like the answer. "Just a few days," Derek said quickly, shooting a look at Sophia that I didn't miss. "Maybe a week," Sophia corrected. "We haven't really decided." "That's the beauty of being spontaneous, right, Mom? You always said life was about embracing the unexpected." I had said that back when she was 16 and afraid to try out for the school play. I hadn't meant it as permission to treat my home like a free hotel 36 years later. "Of course," I said, because what else could I say? "Let me show you to the guest room." As I led them upstairs, I caught Derek looking around with the sort of appreciation that comes from knowing property values. The beach house had been my sanctuary for the past 5 years, ever since my divorce from Sophia's father. It was modest by Malibu standards, but still worth more than most people's retirement funds. "This is beautiful, Mrs. Whitmore," Derek said genuinely. "You have incredible taste." "Thank you." I opened the guest room door, noting that I'd need to change the sheets and clear out the boxes of Christmas decorations I'd been storing on the bed. I wasn't expecting company, so give me a few minutes to make it habitable. "Don't go to any trouble, Mom," Sophia said, already bouncing on the mattress to test it. "We're just happy to be here." Happy, right? That afternoon, while they went for a walk on the beach, I prepared the room properly and tried to figure out why this visit felt different from Sophia's usual dramatic entrances into my life. Maybe it was the way Derek had looked at the house, or maybe it was the fact that she'd gotten married without even telling me, but something was definitely off. By dinner time, I had my answer. Derek excused himself to take a phone call, and Sophia helped herself to a glass of my good wine without asking. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something," she said, settling onto my couch like she owned it. "I'm listening. Derek and we're not just here for a romantic getaway." She paused dramatically, swirling her wine. "We're here because we think it might be time for you to consider your living situation." My living situation. I kept my voice level, though something cold was beginning to spread through my chest. "You're all alone out here. What if something happened? What if you fell or had an emergency? Derek thinks, and I agree, that it might be safer for you to move into something more manageable, closer to town, maybe a nice condo." I stared at my daughter, this woman I'd given birth to, nursed through countless illnesses, supported through her rebellious 20s, and tried to love despite her selfish streak that seemed to grow wider every year. "And you thought you'd just show up here and convince me to sell my house?" "Not sell it exactly." She took another sip of wine, avoiding my eyes. "Derek has some experience in real estate investment. He thinks this property could be much better utilized if it was, properly managed." The pieces clicked into place like tumblers in a lock. The unexpected visit, the new husband with the expensive taste, the suggestion that I was too old and frail to live safely in my own home. How thoughtful of Derek to take such an interest in my welfare. I said, "Mom, don't be like that. We're trying to help you." "Help me what exactly?" "Make some smart financial decisions. You could live very comfortably on the proceeds from this place, and Derek could handle all the investment details. It would be like having your own personal financial advisor." For 28 years, I'd watched my daughter's gift for rationalization. But this was impressive, even for her. She'd married a stranger and was now sitting in my living room, suggesting I hand over my home to him for proper management. "That's incredibly generous," I said. "But I'm quite happy with my current living situation." Sophia's smile tightened. "Mom, you're not getting any younger. Wouldn't it be better to make these changes while you can still enjoy the benefits?" Derek chose that moment to retire from his phone call, his charming smile back in place. "Sorry about that. Business never stops. You know how it is." "Actually, I don't," I said. "What business are you in, Derek?" "Property development, investment consulting. I help people maximize their real estate potential." How convenient. The three of us sat there for a moment, the tension thick enough to spread on toast. Derek seemed to sense that his new wife's subtle approach wasn't working. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, leaning forward with the kind of sincerity that probably worked wonders in board meetings. "I hope you don't think we're being presumptuous. Sophia just worries about you." And when she told me about this beautiful property sitting here underutilized, well, for one person, it seems like a lot of house. I looked around my living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows facing the ocean. The fireplace I'd spent countless evenings reading beside. The kitchen where I'd taught myself to cook for one and discovered I actually enjoyed it. "You're right," I said finally. "It is a lot of house for one person. That's what makes it perfect." The next morning was when Sophia dropped the bomb that would change everything. I was making scrambled eggs for 3 when my daughter delivered the speech that revealed exactly how entitled she'd become in the 4 days since I'd become Mrs. Derek Castellano. "Mom, I need to talk to you about expectations," Sophia said, not looking up from her phone while I stood at the stove like hired help. "What kind of expectations?" Derek was seated at my kitchen counter reading financial news on his tablet and occasionally making little humming sounds at whatever he was discovering about market trends. He'd been doing that since yesterday, treating my home like his personal office space. "Well, since we're staying here, I think it's important to establish some ground rules." Sophia finally looked up, and I saw that expression I remembered from her teenage years when she was about to announce something I wouldn't like. "Ground rules," I repeated, flipping eggs that were starting to smell better than this conversation was going. "Derek has very specific requirements for his morning routine. He's an early riser, likes to get his day started right. Quality nutrition, quiet environment for his morning calls with the East Coast." I glanced at Derek, who was nodding along like his wife was discussing something. Perfectly reasonable instead of treating my house like a luxury hotel where the staff could be instructed. That sounds like Derek's problem to solve, I said pleasantly. Actually, Mom, I was hoping you could help with that. Sophia's voice took on that wheedling tone that used to work when she was 7 and wanted an extra bedtime story. Since you're always up early anyway, and you love to cook. I love to cook for myself on my schedule. Derek looked up from his tablet with a smile that probably cost him thousands. In dental work, Mrs. Whitmore. What Sophia is trying to say is that we'd be incredibly grateful for any assistance you could provide as the host. You know, host, as if I'd invited them to come disrupt my peaceful existence and then start making demands about breakfast service. I see, I said, turning back to my eggs before I said something that would reveal exactly how I was feeling about their attitude. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate, Sophia continued, apparently taking my silence as agreement. Just something ready by 5 a.m. Derek likes his coffee strong, no sugar, and maybe some eggs Benedict or fresh fruit. Nothing too complicated. 5 a.m. She wanted me to get up at 4 a.m. to prepare eggs Benedict for her husband of 6 days who had the audacity to suggest my home was underutilized. Eggs Benedict, I said slowly, or whatever you think is appropriate. You're so good at this domestic stuff, Mom. It's really one of your strengths. One of my strengths, like domestic. Service was a talent I should be proud to share rather than a set of skills I developed to take care of my own home and my own life. I served their breakfast and watched Derek cut into his eggs with the precision of someone who'd never had to cook for himself. He'd probably lived his entire adult life with women eager to prove their worth by anticipating his needs. This is delicious, he said. You're quite the chef, Mrs. Whitmore. Thank you. It's really perfect training for when you move into a smaller place, Sophia added, apparently unable to let the real estate conversation go. You'll have so much more time for cooking when you don't have all this space to maintain. After breakfast, they announced they were driving into town to explore and would be back for dinner. They said it like I'd be waiting here ready to prepare their evening meal, which I suppose from their perspective I would be. But as I watched the rental car disappear down my driveway, I wasn't thinking about dinner preparations. I was thinking about alarm clocks and exactly what kind of surprise I could prepare for Derek's 5 o'clock a.m. breakfast requirement. I spent the afternoon doing research. Not the kind Derek would expect, though. I started with my laptop looking up property records and investment companies. Derek Castano owned 3 LLCs, 2 of which had been dissolved in the past year. His property development business had exactly 1 project listed, a small apartment building in Riverside that was currently in foreclosure proceedings. Interesting. I also discovered that Derek had been married once before to a woman named Jennifer Walsh, who'd owned a successful catering business in San Diego. The business had been sold suddenly 2 years ago, right around the time their divorce was finalized. Even more interesting. But the most interesting thing I found was a small article in a Riverside newspaper about a lawsuit filed by elderly homeowners who claimed they'd been pressured into selling their properties below market value to an investment company that promised to handle all the details and pay the monthly proceeds that never materialized. The company was called Castellaniano Holdings, LLC. By the time Sophia and Derek returned from their town exploration, I had a much clearer picture of what they were really doing here, and I had a plan. How was your day? I asked as they came through the door with shopping bags from expensive boutiques. Wonderful, Sophia said, dropping packages on my coffee table. We found this amazing real estate office in town. The agent said properties like this one are incredibly sought after. She mentioned that similar houses have sold for well above asking price recently. Really? Derek nodded enthusiastically. The market is exceptionally strong right now for coastal properties. It might be the perfect time to make a move if you were considering it. You know, I've been thinking about what you both said, I replied, and watched them exchange a quick look of triumph. That's wonderful, Mom. I knew you'd see the logic in it. Yes, the logic is quite clear. I smiled at Derek, and I've been thinking about your breakfast requirements, too. 5 a.m. is quite early. I know it's an imposition, Derek said, though his tone suggested he didn't find it imposing at all. But I really do function better with a proper start to the day. Of course you do. I completely understand. I looked directly at him, noting the way he was already relaxing into what he thought was victory. I'll make sure everything is ready for you tomorrow morning. Something special. You're the best, Mom. Sophia said, kissing my cheek like we'd just concluded a business deal rather than discussing my role as their unpaid household staff. That evening, I served them dinner on my good china and listened to them discuss their plans for maximizing the property's potential as if I weren't sitting right there. They talked about removing walls, updating fixtures, and creating multiple revenue streams through vacation rentals. They were carving up my home like it was already theirs. After they went upstairs, I cleaned the kitchen and then sat on my deck with a glass of wine, listening to the waves and planning tomorrow's breakfast surprise. Derek wanted everything his way, and Derek was an early riser who valued his routine. Perfect. I was going to give him exactly what he'd asked for. At 4 a.m., my alarm went off just like I'd promised. But Derek and Sophia had no idea what they'd actually requested when they turned me into their personal breakfast chef. I moved quietly through my dark kitchen, muscle memory guiding me as I prepared what would definitely be the most memorable meal of Derek's life. The sunrise was still 2 hours away, but I was wide awake and absolutely focused on the task at hand. Coffee first. Derek liked it strong, no sugar. I ground the beans fresh, just the way he'd specified, and added my own special ingredient, a hefty dose of senicides, the active component in natural laxative tablets. Enough to turn his digestive system into a ticking time bomb, but not enough to actually harm him. Just enough to make his day extremely uncomfortable. While the coffee brewed, I prepared his eggs Benedict. I'd been cooking for 34 years, so creating a picture-perfect breakfast wasn't challenging. What was challenging was deciding exactly how much additional seasoning to add to ensure Derek's morning would be as memorable as mine was about to be. I'd crushed up 3 more laxative tablets and mixed them into the Hollands sauce. The beauty of Hollands is that it already has such a complex flavor that a little extra bitterness would be completely masked by the lemon and butter. For Sophia's breakfast, I prepared regular scrambled eggs and toast. She hadn't made demands about timing or service, so she'd get exactly what she'd always gotten from me, the bare minimum effort required to avoid being accused of being an unloving mother. At exactly 4:47 a.m., I heard movement upstairs. Derek's internal clock was apparently as precise as his demands. I arranged his breakfast beautifully on my best plates and waited. Mrs. Whitmore. Derek appeared in the kitchen wearing an expensive silk robe and looking surprised to see everything ready. You actually did this. You said 5 a.m. I aimed to please. He sat down at the counter and I poured his specially prepared coffee into my finest china cup. This smells fantastic. You really didn't have to go to all this trouble. No trouble at all. I watched him take his first sip and smiled. I believe in giving people exactly what they ask for. Derek ate with the enthusiasm of someone who'd grown accustomed to having his needs anticipated and met without question. He complimented the eggs, praised the coffee, and told me how much he appreciated having someone who understood the importance of routine. You're quite the hostess, he said, finishing his last bite. Sophia was right when she said you had a gift for this. I have many gifts, I replied. Some of them take longer to reveal themselves than others. Sophia eventually wandered downstairs in her pajamas, looking like she'd expected to find me already cleaning up after her husband's breakfast. Oh, good. You actually did it, she said, as if there had been some question about whether I'd follow through on their ridiculous request. Of course I did it. I always do what I say I'm going to do. This is exactly what I was talking about yesterday, she continued, helping herself to coffee. You're so good at taking care of people. It's really what makes you happy, taking care of people, as opposed to having my own life, my own interests, my own schedule. According to my daughter, my highest calling was serving breakfast to her husband at dawn. I live to serve, I said, and neither of them caught the sarcasm. Derek excused himself to take a shower and get ready for his morning calls. I cleaned up the kitchen while Sophia sat at the counter scrolling through her phone, occasionally making comments about how nice it was to have a proper breakfast ready without having to think about it. "Derek is really impressed with you," she said eventually. "He said you remind him of his grandmother who always had everything organized and ready." His grandmother. I was 52 years old, and my daughter's husband was comparing me to his deceased grandmother. How flattering. I think this arrangement could really work out. For everyone, Sophia continued. You get to feel useful and needed. We get to enjoy some quality family time, and Derek gets the kind of environment that helps him be productive. Quality family time, where I provided free meal service while they discussed selling my house. About 45 minutes after breakfast, I heard the first signs that my special recipe was taking effect. Derek's voice drifted down from upstairs, calling Sophia's name with what sounded like urgency. "Sophia," was the bathroom, upstairs hall, first door on the right, she called back, not looking up from her phone. "I found it, but is there another one?" I continued wiping down counters that were already clean, hiding my smile. "Mom, do you have any stomach medication?" Derek's voice came from the top of the stairs, sounding considerably less confident than it had during breakfast. "In the medicine cabinet," I called back. "Are you feeling unwell?" "Just a little stomach upset. Probably something I ate yesterday." Sophia finally looked concerned. "Derek, are you okay?" "I'm sure it's fine. Just could you maybe postpone that 9 a.m. call? I might need a few more minutes." Over the next hour, Derek made 6 trips to the bathroom. By the 3rd trip, he was walking much faster. By the 5th, he was practically running. "I don't understand what's wrong with him," Sophia said, pacing around my kitchen. "He never gets sick." "Food poisoning can be very sudden," I said sympathetically. "Maybe something from that restaurant you went to yesterday, but I ate the same things he did, and I feel fine." Everyone reacts differently to bacteria. Derek appeared in the doorway, pale and sweating. "Sophia, I need you to call Dr. Martinez. Something is seriously wrong. Should I take you to the hospital?" Sophia was starting to panic, which was almost as satisfying as watching Derek's discomfort. "Let's see how you feel after it works its way through your system," I suggested helpfully. "Sometimes these things just need time." "Mrs. Whitmore, I hate to ask, but do you have any Pepto-Bismol or Imodium?" "Anything." "I'll check." I made a show of looking through my medicine cabinet and returned with a bottle of antacids that would do absolutely nothing for his current problem. This might help. Derek swallowed 4 tablets and retreated upstairs again. For the rest of the morning, the only sounds in my house were his footsteps rushing between the bedroom and bathroom, punctuated by Sophia's concerned questions and his increasingly strained responses. By lunchtime, he was too weak to come downstairs. "Mom, I think we should take him to urgent care. Sophia said he's been sick for hours." "If you think that's best," I agreed. "Though sometimes these stomach bugs just have to run their course. This isn't a stomach bug. This is serious." I looked at my daughter with all the concern I could muster. "You're probably right. Food poisoning can be dangerous if it gets too severe." As they prepared to leave for the medical center, Derek managed to make it downstairs looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past 4 hours. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm so sorry about this," he said weakly. "I don't know what happened." "These things are unpredictable," I said. "I do hope you feel better soon." "We might be a while at the doctor," Sophia said, helping Derek to the car. "Don't wait up for us." I watched them drive away. Derek hunched over in the passenger seat like he was afraid to move too suddenly. Then I went back to my kitchen and disposed of the rest of the crushed laxatives I'd hidden in the spice cabinet. Tomorrow morning, Derek would probably be feeling much better, but I doubted he'd be quite so enthusiastic about requesting breakfast at 5 a.m., and this was just the beginning of what I had planned for my unexpected house guests. Derek spent 3 hours at urgent care, only to be told he had a severe case of food poisoning and needed to stay hydrated and rest. When they returned that afternoon, he looked like a man who'd been through a war and lost. "The doctor said it was probably something he ate yesterday," Sophia announced as she helped Derek up the stairs. "He needs to stick to bland foods for the next few days." "How terrible!" I said, following them with a picture of ice water. I feel so guilty. What if it was something I saved this morning? No, Mom. The doctor said the timing doesn't match. Food poisoning from breakfast would have started much sooner. Derek collapsed onto the guest bed like his legs couldn't support him anymore. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm so sorry about this. Oh, sorry. I know we've disrupted your routine. Don't you worry about anything, I said, arranging pillows behind his back. Your only job is to get better. For the rest of the day, Derek stayed in bed while Sophia played nursemaid, bringing him sips of ginger ale and checking his temperature every hour. I made a simple chicken broth for dinner and served it to him on a tray, playing the concerned hostess to perfection. You're so kind, Derek said weakly. I don't know what we would have done if we were staying at a hotel. That's what family is for, I replied, noting how quickly he'd accepted the family designation when he needed care. That evening, while Derek slept fitfully upstairs, Sophia and I sat on my deck watching the sunset. I'm worried about him, she said. He never gets sick. He has this whole health routine. Takes supplements, exercises every day. Sometimes our bodies surprise us. I said stress can lower immunity. Stress? Well, starting a new marriage, traveling, making big life decisions. That can all take a toll. Sophia looked at me sideways. What big life decisions? Your suggestion about me selling this house. That's a major financial decision. I'm sure Derek feels responsible for helping me make the right choice. Oh, she seemed to consider this. Actually, we were planning to talk to you more about that. Derek has some concrete proposals he wanted to present. I'm sure he does. He really knows what he's talking about, Mom. He's helped other people in similar situations. Similar situations like elderly homeowners who needed guidance from a young man with expensive taste and failing businesses. I'd be very interested to hear his proposals, I said. When he's feeling better, of course. The next morning, Derek emerged from the guest room looking significantly improved, but still cautious. He'd apparently spent the night afraid to eat anything substantial, which meant my laxative surprise had done exactly what I'd intended. How are you feeling? I asked, as he tentatively sipped the herbal tea I'd prepared. Much better, thank you. I think the worst is over. I'm so glad. There's nothing worse than being sick away from home. Derek nodded, then looked around my kitchen with what I was starting to recognize as his appraising expression. Mrs. Whitmore, I hope we can continue the conversation we started a few days ago about your living situation. Of course, I've been thinking about what you said. His eyes lit up. Really? Really? In fact, your illness yesterday made me realize how isolated I am out here. If something serious happened to me, no one would know. Sophia appeared in the doorway, still in her robe. See, Mom, that's exactly what we've been trying to tell you. Yes, you've been very persuasive. I poured Derek more tea, watching him carefully for any signs that he was planning to make breakfast demands again. Derek, you mentioned you had experience helping other people with their property decisions. Absolutely. It's actually a specialty of mine, helping seniors transition from large properties they can no longer maintain to more appropriate living situations. Seniors. I was 52 and he was talking about me like I was ready for assisted living. And you handle all the financial details, everything. The property assessment, market analysis, sale, negotiations, investment strategy for the proceeds. My clients don't have to worry about any of your return on investment, and you'd handle the sale directly through my company. Yes, it's much more efficient than dealing complicated aspects. Your clients, I repeated. How many people have you helped with this kind of transition? Derek exchanged a quick glance with Sophia. Several. In fact, I just completed a successful transition for a lovely elderly woman in Riverside who was struggling to maintain her family home, the lovely elderly woman whose house was now in foreclosure proceedings. That sounds perfect, I said. I'd love to hear more details about how the process works. Well, first we'd need to do a proper assessment of the property value. Then we'd look at your current financial situation, debts, expenses, that sort of thing. After that, I can present you with several options for maximizing with traditional real estate agents who don't understand the unique needs of senior property owners. I nodded thoughtfully. It sounds like you've put a lot of thought into this. I have. I can see how much stress this kind of decision would create for someone in your position. Having professional guidance makes all the difference. Someone in my position, a helpless middle-aged woman who needed a young man to swoop in and solve her problems. Derek, I said, leaning forward with what I hoped looked like genuine interest. Would it be possible to see some documentation of your previous work, success stories, client testimonials, that sort of thing? Of course. I have a complete portfolio back in Riverside. I could have my assistant email you some examples. That would be wonderful. For the next hour, Derek laid out his vision for my future. I would sell the house to his investment company for what he called a fair market price, which would be determined by his assessment. The proceeds would be invested in a portfolio he would manage, providing me with monthly income while the principal grew over time. I would move to a small condo in a senior community where I wouldn't have to worry about maintenance or security. Derek would handle all the financial details for a modest management fee. It was a beautiful plan for Derek. This all sounds very professional, I said when he finished his presentation. I'm impressed by how thoroughly you've thought this through. I believe in being prepared. Derek said the real estate market can be volatile, so timing is crucial. And you think now is the right time? Absolutely. The market is strong. Interest rates are favorable. And frankly, Mrs. Whitmore, you're at the perfect age to make this transition before you're forced to by circumstances. Forced to by circumstances like a health crisis or financial emergency that would leave me vulnerable to exactly the kind of pressure he was applying right now. I appreciate your concern for my welfare, I said. It's touching to see how much you care about my future security. Derek beamed, apparently convinced that he'd successfully manipulated a lonely middle-aged woman into handing over her most valuable asset. But Derek had no idea that while he was recovering from his mystery illness yesterday, I'd been making some phone calls of my own. To the elderly woman in Riverside, whose house he'd helped her sell, to his ex-wife in San Diego, to a very interesting private investigator who specialized in real estate fraud. Derek thought he was closing in on his next victim. What he didn't realize was that I'd been setting a trap, and he was about to walk right into it. Derek, I said, standing up from the kitchen table, I think I'm ready to move forward with your proposal. The look of triumph that flashed across Derek's face when I agreed to his proposal was almost worth the week of listening to him treat my house like his personal resort. That's wonderful news, Mrs. Whitmore, he said, already reaching for his phone. I can have my team start the assessment process as early as tomorrow. Actually, I said, raising a hand to stop him, I'd like to invite some other people to be part of this decision. You know how complicated financial matters can be for someone my age. Derek's smile faltered slightly. Other people? Well, my attorney for one, and my financial advisor. I'm sure you understand. A decision this significant requires proper legal review. Sophia looked confused. Mom, I didn't know you had a financial advisor. Oh, yes, Harold Manning. He's been managing my investment since the divorce. Very conservative approach, but has kept me quite comfortable. I smiled at Derek. I'm sure you two will have a lot to discuss about investment strategies. Derek was nodding, but I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. The presence of actual financial professionals would complicate his carefully crafted sales pitch. Of course, he said, I always recommend that my clients get independent verification of any proposals. It's just good business practice. I knew you'd understand. Oh, and I've also invited Jennifer Walsh to join us. The color drained from Derek's face so quickly, I thought he might faint. Jennifer Walsh? Yes, your ex-wife. Such a sweet woman. We had the most interesting conversation yesterday while you were recovering. Sophia looked back and forth between us. Derek, you talked to his ex-wife. Why would you do that? Just doing my due diligence, I said cheerfully. When someone is offering to help me manage my financial future, I like to understand the background thoroughly. Derek had gone completely silent, staring at me like I just pulled a gun on him. Jennifer had such fascinating stories about your business practices, I continued, especially regarding her catering company, the one that was sold so suddenly right before your divorce. Mrs. Whitmore, Derek said carefully, I think there may have been some misunderstandings in whatever conversation you had with my ex-wife. Oh, I don't think so. She was very clear about how you convinced her to put her business up as collateral for some property investments that didn't work out quite as planned. Sophia was looking increasingly alarmed. Derek, what is she talking about? It's complicated, honey. Jennifer and I had some business disagreements during our marriage. She's still bitter about the divorce. Is she bitter about the bankruptcy, too? I asked. Or just about losing her life's work to cover your failed real estate ventures? Eric stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against my kitchen floor. I think there's been a serious miscommunication here. I don't think so. At all. In fact, I think the communication has been perfectly clear. I looked directly at him. You've been very transparent about your intentions, Derek. You want to help me sell my house to your investment company, manage the proceeds through your financial services, and move me into a situation where I'm completely dependent on your expertise. That's not how I would characterize it. How would you characterize it? I'm trying to help you make a smart financial transition. The same way you helped Eleanor Patterson in Riverside. This time Derek actually stepped backward. How do you know about Eleanor? Oh, we've become quite friendly. She's very interested in meeting you again. Actually something about wanting to discuss why her monthly payments stopped coming and why her house is now in foreclosure proceedings. Sophia was staring at her husband with growing horror. Derek, what the hell is going on? Sophia, your mother has been listening to lies from people who don't understand legitimate business practices. Legitimate business practices, I repeated. Is that what you call convincing elderly homeowners to sell their properties below market value to your investment company, then failing to provide the promised monthly payments? Those are complicated financial instruments. Sometimes market conditions. Sometimes con artists get caught, I interrupted, and sometimes their new wives discover that they've married a fraud. Derek's mask of charm was completely gone now, replaced by the cold calculation I'd suspected was underneath all along. You have no idea what you're talking about, he said, and you have no proof of anything inappropriate. Actually, I have quite a bit of proof. Harold Manning, my financial advisor, is also a forensic accountant. He's been very interested in reviewing the financial records for Castellano Holdings LLC. Derek went completely still. You don't have access to those records? No, but the state of California does, especially when multiple complaints have been filed about fraudulent business practices. I walked to my kitchen counter and picked up a manila folder I'd placed there that morning. Would you like to see the complaint I filed yesterday with the State Attorney General's office? You did what? Filed a detailed complaint about a pattern of elder fraud targeting homeowners along the coast. I included Eleanor Patterson's documentation, Jennifer's testimony about your business practices, and a fascinating analysis of how your investment schemes actually work. Sophia sank into her chair. Mom, are you saying Derek is some kind of criminal? I'm saying Derek is a con artist who specializes in targeting women he thinks are vulnerable and isolated. I opened the folder and pulled out several documents. Women like his ex-wife who trusted him with her business. Women like Eleanor Patterson, who thought she was making a smart financial decision. Women like me, who he assumed would be grateful for male guidance and financial protection. Derek was edging toward the kitchen door, but I wasn't finished. The beautiful part of your plan, Derek, was how you used my own daughter to get close to me, marry the woman with access to the target, convince her that she's helping her mother, and exploit the family relationship to bypass normal suspicion. Sophia, we need to leave now. But Sophia was staring at him with dawning realization. The quick wedding. You wanted to get married before meeting my mother. You said it was romantic, but you were establishing legal cover. Sophia, don't listen to her. She's a paranoid old woman who's been. I'm 52, Derek. Not old, not paranoid, and definitely not helpless. I stood up holding the folder. I'm also not someone who can be intimidated by a failed real estate developer with a pattern of defrauding women. Derek made a break for the door, but I wasn't trying to stop him. I wanted him to run. Derek beamed, apparently convinced that he'd successfully manipulated a lonely middle-aged woman into handing over her most valuable asset. But Derek had no idea that while he was recovering from his mystery illness yesterday, I'd been making some phone calls of my own. To the elderly woman in Riverside, whose house he'd helped her sell, to his ex-wife in San Diego, to a very interesting private investigator who specialized in real estate fraud. Derek thought he was closing in on his next victim. What he didn't realize was that I'd been setting a trap, and he was about to walk right into it. "Derek," I said, standing up from the kitchen table, "I think I'm ready to move forward with your proposal." The look of triumph that flashed across Derek's face when I agreed to his proposal was almost worth the week of listening to him treat my house like his personal resort. "That's wonderful news, Mrs. Whitmore," he said, already reaching for his phone. "I can have my team start the assessment process as early as tomorrow." "Actually," I said, raising a hand to stop him, "I'd like to invite some other people to be part of this decision. You know how complicated financial matters can be for someone my age." Derek's smile faltered slightly. "Other people? Well, my attorney for one, and my financial advisor. I'm sure you understand. A decision this significant requires proper legal review." Sophia looked confused. "Mom, I didn't know you had a financial advisor." "Oh, yes, Harold Manning. He's been managing my investment since the divorce. Very conservative approach, but has kept me quite comfortable." I smiled at Derek. "I'm sure you two will have a lot to discuss about investment strategies." Derek was nodding, but I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. The presence of actual financial professionals would complicate his carefully crafted sales pitch. "Of course," he said, "I always recommend that my clients get independent verification of any proposals. It's just good business practice. I knew you'd understand. Oh, and I've also invited Jennifer Walsh to join us." The color drained from Derek's face so quickly, I thought he might faint. "Jennifer Walsh?" "Yes, your ex-wife. Such a sweet woman. We had the most interesting conversation yesterday while you were recovering." Sophia looked back and forth between us. "Derek, you talked to his ex-wife. Why would you do that?" "Just doing my due diligence," I said cheerfully. "When someone is offering to help me manage my financial future, I like to understand their background thoroughly." Derek had gone completely silent, staring at me like I'd just pulled a gun on him. "Jennifer had such fascinating stories about your business practices," I continued, "especially regarding her catering company, the one that was sold so suddenly right before your divorce." "Mrs. Whitmore," Derek said carefully, "I think there may have been some misunderstandings in whatever conversation you had with my ex-wife." "Oh, I don't think so. She was very clear about how you convinced her to put her business up as collateral for some property investments that didn't work out quite as planned." Sophia was looking increasingly alarmed. "Derek, what is she talking about?" "It's complicated, honey. Jennifer and I had some business disagreements during our marriage. She's still bitter about the divorce." "Is she bitter about the bankruptcy, too?" I asked. "Or just about losing her life's work to cover your failed real estate ventures?" Derek stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against my kitchen floor. "I think there's been a serious miscommunication here." "I don't think so. At all. In fact, I think the communication has been perfectly clear." I looked directly at him. "You've been very transparent about your intentions, Derek. You want to help me sell my house to your investment company, manage the proceeds through your financial services, and move me into a situation where I'm completely dependent on your expertise. That's not how I would characterize it." "How would you characterize it?" "I'm trying to help you make a smart financial transition. The same way you helped Eleanor Patterson in Riverside." This time Derek actually stepped backward. "How do you know about Eleanor?" "Oh, we've become quite friendly. She's very interested in meeting you again." Actually, something about wanting to discuss why her monthly payments stopped coming and why her house is now in foreclosure proceedings. Sophia was staring at her husband with growing horror. Derek, what the hell is going on? Sophia, your mother has been listening to lies from people who don't understand legitimate business practices. Legitimate business practices, I repeated. Is that what you call convincing elderly homeowners to sell their properties below market value to your investment company, then failing to provide the promised monthly payments? Those are complicated financial instruments. Sometimes market conditions. Sometimes con artists get caught, I interrupted, and sometimes their new wives discover that they've married a fraud. Derek's mask of charm was completely gone now, replaced by the cold calculation I'd suspected was underneath all along. You have no idea what you're talking about, he said, and you have no proof of anything inappropriate. Actually, I have quite a bit of proof. Harold Manning, my financial advisor, is also a forensic accountant. He's been very interested in reviewing the financial records for Castellano Holdings LLC. Derek went completely still. You don't have access to those records? No, but the state of California does, especially when multiple complaints have been filed about fraudulent business practices. I walked to my kitchen counter and picked up a manila folder I'd placed there that morning. Would you like to see the complaint I filed yesterday with the State Attorney General's office? You did what? Filed a detailed complaint about a pattern of elder fraud targeting homeowners along the coast. I included Eleanor Patterson's documentation, Jennifer's testimony about your business practices, and a fascinating analysis of how your investment schemes actually work. Sophia sank into her chair. Mom, are you saying Derek is some kind of criminal? I'm saying Derek is a con artist who specializes in targeting women he thinks are vulnerable and isolated. I opened the folder and pulled out several documents. Women like his ex-wife who trusted him with her business. Women like Eleanor Patterson, who thought she was making a smart financial decision. Women like me, who he assumed would be grateful for male guidance and financial protection. Derek was edging toward the kitchen door, but I wasn't finished. The beautiful part of your plan, Derek, was how you used my own daughter to get close to me, marry the woman with access to the target, convince her that she's helping her mother, and exploit the family relationship to bypass normal suspicion. Sophia, we need to leave now. But Sophia was staring at him with dawning realization. The quick wedding. You wanted to get married before meeting my mother. You said it was romantic, but you were establishing legal cover. Sophia, don't listen to her. She's a paranoid old woman who's been. I'm 52, Derek. Not old, not paranoid, and definitely not helpless. I stood up holding the folder. I'm also not someone who can be intimidated by a failed real estate developer with a pattern of defrauding women. Derek made a break for the door, but I wasn't trying to stop him. I wanted him to run. The California State Police will be very interested in your travel patterns. I called after him, especially since you're now officially under investigation for elder fraud. He turned back for a moment, his handsome face twisted with rage. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, Derek, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. The question is whether you know who you tried to con. As Derek rushed upstairs to pack, Sophia remained sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the documents I'd spread in front of her. Mom, she said quietly, did I really bring a criminal into your house? You brought someone who saw you as a tool to get access to me and my property. The criminal part was just his method. I thought he loved me. He might have, but he loved the idea of my real estate more. What happens now? I looked at my daughter, this woman who'd spent the past week treating me like hired help while her husband planned to steal my home. Now you decide whether you're going to be part of the solution or part of the problem. Upstairs, we could hear Derek slamming drawers and shouting into his phone. He was probably calling a lawyer or maybe warning other potential victims, but it was too late for Derek. The trap had been set and he'd walked into it completely. The only question now was what Sophia was going to do when she realized her week-old marriage was about to become evidence in a fraud investigation. Derek was gone within 20 minutes, speeding away in their rental car like the house was on fire which from his perspective it probably was. What he left behind was my daughter sitting at my kitchen table staring at the evidence of her husband's criminal activities and about 15 missed calls on his phone that he'd abandoned in his panic to escape. "Mom," Sophia said finally, her voice small and defeated. "How long have you known?" "I suspected something was wrong the moment you both showed up here, talking about my living situation, but I didn't have proof until yesterday." I sat down across from her, noting how young she looked without Derek's confidence propping her up. "The question is, how much did you know?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "I swear, Mom, I thought he was legitimate. He showed me financial documents, client testimonials. Everything looked professional. Did it occur to you to wonder why a successful investment consultant would be so interested in marrying someone he'd known for 6 months?" Sophia's face crumpled. "I thought he loved me. He was so charming, so attentive. He made me feel special." "You are special, sweetheart." But Derek wasn't interested in special. He was interested in access. Derek's abandoned phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen and saw a name that made my blood run cold. Eleanor Patterson. "Sophia, I need to answer this call." "Mrs. Castellano." The elderly woman's voice was shaky and frightened. "I've been trying to reach Derek all morning. The bank called again about the foreclosure proceedings, and I don't understand what's happening." "Mrs. Patterson, this is Patricia Whitmore, Derek's mother-in-law. I'm afraid Derek isn't available right now." "Oh, well, maybe you can help me. I gave Derek all my legal documents when he bought my house, but now the bank is saying I still owe money on a mortgage that was supposed to be paid off. Derek promised me monthly payments, but they stopped coming 3 months ago." I felt sick listening to her confusion and fear. This woman had trusted Derek with her home and her financial security, and he'd left her facing homelessness. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to give you some phone numbers. There are people who can help you, but you need to contact them today." After I finished giving Eleanor the contact information for the State Attorney General's Elder Fraud Division and a non-profit legal aid organization, I hung up and looked at my daughter. "That's what your husband does, Sophia. He preys on older women who trust him. But I'm not older, and I don't have any assets he could steal." "No, but you have something even more valuable. You have me." Sophia was quiet for a long time, processing the reality of her situation. She was legally married to a man who was about to be charged with multiple counts of fraud. Even if she hadn't participated in his schemes, her association with him would complicate her life for years. "What do I do now?" she asked. "You make a choice. You can contact Derek, warn him about the investigation, and try to help him avoid prosecution, or you can cooperate with the authorities and try to minimize the damage to your own life. You make it. Sounds simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Derek is a criminal, Sophia. The only question is whether you're going to be his accomplice or his victim." That afternoon, Detective Sarah Chen from the California State Police Financial Crimes Division arrived at my house with a briefcase full of documentation and a very interested expression. "Mrs. Whitmore, the complaint you filed has opened up a much larger investigation than we initially expected," she said, settling into my living room with the authority of someone used to dealing with financial predators. "How much larger?" "Derek Castellano appears to have been operating this scheme in multiple states over the past 5 years. We've identified at least 12 victims, mostly women over 60, who own valuable real estate." 12 women, I repeated, thinking about Eleanor Patterson's frightened voice on the phone, possibly more. The pattern is always the same. He identifies vulnerable targets, usually through personal connections or dating relationships, gains their trust, convinces them to sign over property management to his company, and then systematically drains their assets. Sophia, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, finally spoke up. "Detective, what's going to happen to me? I married him, but I didn't know about any of this." Detective Chen studied her carefully. "That depends on several factors. How much you knew, when you knew it, and whether you're willing to cooperate with our investigation." "I'll cooperate," Sophia said immediately. I'll tell you everything I know. Good. We'll need detailed statements about your relationship with Mr. Castano, his business activities, his associates, and any conversations you had about his work. For the next 3 hours, Detective Chen interviewed both of us. Sophia provided information about Derek's business contacts, his travel patterns, and his methods for researching potential targets. I shared everything I discovered about his previous victims and his attempts to manipulate me. Mrs. Whitmore, Detective Chen said as she prepared to leave, you may have prevented him from adding several more victims to his list. Most people don't think to investigate someone their family member brings home. Most people don't have daughters who show up demanding breakfast service at 5 a.m. I replied. After the detective left, Sophia and I sat on my deck watching the sunset. Both of us, emotionally exhausted from the day's revelations. Mom, I owe you an enormous apology, she said finally, for bringing him here, for the way we treated you, for everything. You owe me more than an apology, Sophia. You owe me an explanation of how you could watch your husband treat me like hired help and think that was acceptable. I know. I was so caught up in feeling important, in being married to someone successful, that I lost sight of what was right. You've always had a tendency to get caught up in appearances, I said. But this time, your poor judgment brought a predator into my home. How do I make this right? I looked at my daughter, this woman who'd spent her entire adult life making impulsive decisions and expecting other people to clean up the consequences. You start by taking responsibility for your choices and the impact on other people. And then you figure out who you want to be when you're not trying to impress someone who is using you. That evening, Derek finally called. Not my number, but Sophia's. She looked at me before answering, and I nodded. Put it on speaker, I said. Sophia, thank God. Derek's voice was tight with panic. Are you okay? Where are you? I'm still at my mother's house, Derek. Where are you? I'm in Nevada. Listen, baby. Your mother has been telling lies about me to the police. She's trying to cause problems for us. What kind of problems, Derek? She filed some kind of false complaint claiming I defrauded people. It's completely fabricated, but I need to stay away until my lawyer can sort it out. Derek, Sophia said carefully, I talked to Eleanor Patterson today. Silence. Derek, she told me about her house, about the missing payments. She told me about the foreclosure. Sophia, that's a complicated business situation. There were market conditions that Derek, I said, leaning toward the phone. This is Patricia. I think you should know that your wife has decided to cooperate with the police investigation. Sophia, don't listen to her. She's a vindictive old woman who's trying to destroy our marriage. Our marriage destroyed itself when you used it to commit fraud, Sophia replied, and I felt a surge of pride at the strength in her voice. Sophia, please. I love you. We can work through this. No, Derek, we can't. I'm filing for divorce. She hung up and turned off her phone. That felt good, she said, surprising both of us. Good. It should. As we prepared for bed that night, Sophia helped me secure all the doors and windows. Derek was desperate now, and desperate people make unpredictable choices. But I wasn't worried. Derek had spent a week thinking he was manipulating a helpless middle-aged woman. He had no idea that this helpless middle-aged woman had been 3 steps ahead of him from the beginning. Tomorrow, he'd discovered just how far ahead I'd been. Derek's second mistake was underestimating how thoroughly I'd documented every aspect of his stay at my house. His first mistake was trying to con me in the first place, but he wouldn't fully understand that until much later. The next morning, while Sophia slept in, I was on a conference call with Detective Chen, Harold Manning, my forensic accountant, and Jennifer Walsh, Derek's ex-wife, who had flown in from San Diego specifically to testify against him. Patricia, the evidence you've gathered is extraordinary, Jennifer said through the speaker. I wish I'd had someone like you watching out for me when Derek was destroying my business. What exactly did he do to your catering company? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. The same thing he tried to do to you. He convinced me to use the business as collateral for what he called a sure thing real estate investment. When the investment failed, because it was designed to fail, I lost everything. Harold Manning, who had been reviewing financial documents while we talked, cleared his throat. Mrs. Walsh, the pattern we're seeing suggests that Derek's investment failures weren't accidental. He was systematically moving assets from his victims' accounts into offshore holdings that he controlled. You mean he was stealing money on purpose? I mean, he was running a sophisticated embezzlement operation disguised as legitimate investment services. Detective Chen's voice was grim. We've traced similar patterns with all 12 of his known victims. The good news is that we now have enough evidence to issue federal charges. The bad news is that most of the stolen money has been moved beyond our immediate reach. What about Derek's current location? I asked. We have people watching the Nevada border and his credit cards are being monitored. He can't stay hidden indefinitely. After the call ended, Sophia came downstairs looking like she hadn't slept much. Any news? Your husband is officially a federal fugitive, I said, pouring her coffee. The FBI issued a warrant this morning. So, it's really over. The criminal part is just beginning. Derek will be caught, prosecuted, and hopefully sent to prison. But the personal part, dealing with being married to a con artist, that's going to take time. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. When did you know for certain that Derek was a fraud? I thought about that question while scrambling eggs for our breakfast. Honestly, the moment he suggested I needed help managing my own life, men like Derek always reveal themselves by assuming women are helpless. But I fell for it completely. You fell for the charm. That's different. I plated her eggs and sat down across from her. Derek is very good at making people feel special, important, needed. It's not stupidity to want those things. Then why didn't you fall for it? Because I've spent the past 5 years learning to live with only my own opinion of myself. When someone shows up telling me I need their guidance, my first instinct is suspicion, not gratitude. Sophia was quiet for a moment, processing this. I've never lived alone. I've always had roommates or boyfriends or someone else making decisions with me, which is exactly what Derek was counting on. That afternoon, my peaceful morning was interrupted by the sound of a car in my driveway. But it wasn't Derek returning. It was a black sedan with government plates. Mrs. Whitmore. A tall man in a suit approached my front door. I'm Agent Martinez with the FBI Financial Crimes Task Force. We need to talk to you about Derek Castellano. Agent Martinez was accompanied by a woman who introduced herself as Agent Kim, and they both had the serious demeanor of people who dealt with high-stakes financial crimes. Derek contacted you last night, correct? Agent Martinez asked, settling into my living room with a digital recorder. He called my daughter's phone. We have the conversation recorded if you need it. Agent Kim leaned forward. Actually, would like you to consider making another call to him. What kind of call? Derek is increasingly desperate. His offshore accounts have been frozen. His known associates are under surveillance, and he's running out of resources. We think he might try to return here to retrieve something he left behind. He left behind a cell phone and some clothes. Nothing valuable. Are you sure? Agent Martinez pulled out a tablet and showed me a photo. Does this look familiar? It was a picture of my guest bedroom, but focused on a corner I hadn't paid much attention to. Behind the decorative plant near the window, something small and metallic was visible. What is that? We believe it's a portable hard drive containing financial records and client information for his entire operation. If we're right, that device contains evidence of crimes in multiple states and possibly internationally. I stared at the photo. Derek had hidden evidence of his fraud ring in my own house. We need to recover that drive, but if we simply raid your property, Derek will know we found it. We'd prefer to let him come back for it himself. You want to use my house as bait? We want to give Derek an opportunity to incriminate himself further while attempting to destroy evidence. Sophia, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway, stepped forward. Agents, my mother has already done enough to help with this investigation. Asking her to put herself in danger is unreasonable. Mrs. Castellano, Agent Kim said, Derek is facing federal charges that could put him in prison for 20 years. He's desperate enough to do anything to avoid prosecution. Whether we set a trap or not, he may come back here anyway. But if we set a trap, I said slowly, you'll be ready for him. Exactly. I looked at the photo again, thinking about Eleanor Patterson's frightened voice on the phone and Jennifer Walsh's destroyed business. Derek had spent years systematically destroying women's lives for profit. What would I need to do? Agent Martinez outlined their plan. I would call Derek and tell him that Sophia had left, that I was alone and frightened, and that I wanted to make a deal. I would suggest that if he returned quietly to collect his belongings, I would consider not cooperating further with the police investigation. He'll be suspicious, Agent Kim warned. Derek is smart, and he knows you've already filed complaints against him. But he's also arrogant, I replied. And arrogant men often believe they can talk their way out of situations that would terrify normal people. There's one more thing, Agent Martinez said. We'll need you to wear a wire during any conversation with Derek, and you'll need to follow our instructions exactly. No improvisation, no attempts to confront him yourself. I thought about this for a moment. A week ago, I'd been enjoying peaceful mornings on my deck, reading books, and painting watercolors. Now, federal agents were asking me to help capture a fugitive in my own home. When do we make the call? I asked. That evening, with FBI agents positioned around my property and sophisticated recording equipment hidden. Throughout my house, I dialed Derek's number. Patricia? He sounded surprised and wary. Derek, I'm glad you answered. I need to talk to you. Where's Sophia? She left this morning. She's furious with both of us and doesn't want anything to do with this situation. What kind of situation? The police keep calling me, asking me questions about you, about your business. Derek, I'm scared. I don't understand what's happening. I could hear the calculation in his silence as he processed this information. Patricia, I know this is confusing for you, but the police are exaggerating everything because they are under pressure to make arrests. But Eleanor Patterson, the woman whose house Eleanor Patterson is a confused elderly woman who doesn't understand complex financial instruments. The police are using her confusion to build a case that doesn't exist. Even knowing Derek was lying, I was impressed by his ability to sound completely sincere. Derek, I just want this to end. I don't want to be involved in a court case or prosecution. I just want my quiet life back. I want that, too, Patricia. And I think we can make that happen. How? I need to come back to the house to collect some things I left behind. Personal items that belong to me. If I can retrieve those items and leave quietly, this whole misunderstanding can be resolved. When? Tonight, late after the police surveillance teams change shifts. Can you make sure all the doors are unlocked? As I hung up the phone, Agent Martinez nodded approvingly. Perfect. He'll be here within 2 hours. And then Derek Castellano's criminal career comes to an end. But I had the feeling that Derek's visit tonight was going to reveal more than just his desperation to escape justice. Men like Derek always had backup plans, and I suspected we were about to discover what his really was. Derek arrived at 2:47 a.m., and from my position at the upstairs window, I watched him approach my house like a predator returning to familiar hunting grounds. He didn't look like a desperate fugitive. He looked confident, purposeful, like a man who still believed he controlled the situation. The FBI had positioned me in my bedroom with Agent Kim while Agent Martinez and 2 other agents waited in concealed positions downstairs. My job was simple. Let Derek retrieve what he came for while the agents recorded everything. But watching Derek move through my garden with that predatory confidence, I realized the FBI didn't fully understand who they were dealing with. Derek wasn't just a con artist who'd made some mistakes. He was a career criminal who'd spent years perfecting his methods. His coming to the front door. Agent Kim whispered into her radio. I heard Derek's key in the lock. The spare key Sophia had given him during their first day here. He'd kept it when he fled, which meant he'd always planned to return. Patricia, Derek's voice drifted up from my living room. Patricia, are you awake? I walked downstairs in my robe and slippers, playing the role of a frightened woman, grateful for his return. Derek stood in my kitchen, but something was different about him. The charming smile was gone, replaced by cold calculation. Derek, thank God you're here, I said, noting that Agent Kim was listening from the top of the stairs. I've been so scared. Have you? Derek stepped closer, and I caught a glimpse of something that made my blood run cold. There was a gun tucked into his waistband. Derek, I just want this nightmare to end. So do I, Patricia. So do I. He moved toward the guest room, but stopped suddenly. You know, I've been thinking about our conversation tonight. About how frightened you are, how much you want this to end. Yes, and I realized something. You're not frightened at all, are you? The question hung in the air like a trap about to spring. Of course, I'm frightened. The police investigation that you started, the detailed complaint that you filed, the forensic accountant that you hired. Derek's voice was perfectly calm, but his eyes were dangerous. Patricia, you've been playing games since the day I arrived here. I could hear Agent Kim moving at the top of the stairs, but Derek was between me and any escape route. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. Derek reached for his waistband. I think you know exactly what you mean. That's when everything went wrong with the FBI's careful plan. Federal agents. Agent Martinez's voice boomed from the kitchen doorway. Hands where I can see them. Derek spun around, pulling his weapon in one smooth motion. I don't think so. Derek, drop the weapon. Agent Kim appeared at the top of the stairs, her own gun drawn. Nobody moves. Derek shouted, swinging his gun between the two agents. Patricia, you're going to walk with me to my car, and we're going to drive away from here. Derek, don't be stupid, I said, surprising myself with how calm my voice sounded. There are agents surrounding this house. Then, they'll get to watch you die if they try to stop me. Agent Martinez was slowly advancing from the kitchen, while Agent Kim remained frozen at the top of the stairs. Derek was cornered, which made him exponentially more dangerous. Derek, I said carefully, what exactly do you think you're going to accomplish here? I'm going to retrieve what I came for, and then you and I are going to disappear until I can arrange safe passage out of the country. And what did you come for? Derek smiled, and for the first time since I'd met him, the expression was completely genuine. You really think it was about that hard drive, wasn't it? The hard drive is worthless. Everything important is stored in offshore servers that the FBI will never access. Derek gestured with his gun toward my living room. What I came for is worth much more than some financial records. What? You, Patricia? I came back for you. The words hit me like a physical blow. What are you talking about? Do you have any idea what your testimony is worth to federal prosecutors? Snorts. You're their star witness, the victim who was smart enough to see through my operation and brave enough to report it. Derek's smile widened. If something tragic happened to you, their entire case would collapse. Agent Kim spoke from the stairs. Derek, you're only making this worse for yourself. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, eliminating their primary witness seems like excellent crisis management. I felt a chill spread through my chest as I realized Derek's real plan. He hadn't come back for evidence or personal belongings. He'd come back to kill me. The other victims can still testify, I said. Elderly victims with questionable memories telling stories about complex financial transactions they never understood. Derek shook his head. Without your detailed documentation and credible testimony, I could beat those charges in court. Derek, Agent Martinez called from the kitchen. You're surrounded. There's no way you're leaving this house alive if you hurt Mrs. Whitmore. Maybe not, but Mrs. Whitmore definitely isn't leaving this house alive if I don't get exactly what I want. That's when I realized something that changed everything. Derek was right about being cornered, but he was wrong about having control. Because while he'd been focused on the FBI agents and his escape plan, he'd forgotten about the one person in this room who'd been 3 steps ahead of him from the beginning. Derek, I said, stepping slightly closer. To him. You're forgetting something important. What's that? You're not the only person in this room who's been planning ahead. I pressed the panic button that Agent Kim had given me earlier, but instead of triggering a standard alarm, it activated something Derek couldn't possibly have expected. Every light in my house went out simultaneously, plunging us into complete darkness. But more importantly, the electromagnetic pulse generator that Harold Manning had hidden in my basement activated, disabling every electronic device within a 50-foot radius, including Derek's gun, which contained an electronic safety mechanism. In the chaos of complete darkness and Derek's confused shouts, I heard Agent Martinez moving toward us. Derek fired twice, but the electronic firing mechanism failed both times. What the hell? Derek's voice was panicked now. Surprise, Derek, I said from somewhere in the darkness. Turns out this helpless middle-aged woman had a few more tricks than you expected. The lights came back on 30 seconds later, revealing Derek on the ground with Agent Martinez kneeling on his back while Agent Kim secured his weapon. That was not part of the plan, Agent Kim said, looking at me with a mixture of admiration and exasperation. No, I agreed. But it worked. As they led Derek away in handcuffs, he turned back to look at me one more time. This isn't over, Patricia. Yes, Derek, it really is. But as I watched the FBI car disappear down my driveway, I couldn't shake the feeling that Derek was right about one thing. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. 3 days after Derek's arrest, I discovered that catching a federal fugitive in my living room was actually the easy part. The hard part was dealing with what Derek had left behind, both literally and figuratively. Mom, you can't stay here, Sophia said for the 5th time that morning. What if Derek has associates who decide to finish what he started? We were sitting on my deck, watching federal agents search every inch of my property for additional evidence. Agent Martinez had assured me that Derek's operation was sophisticated enough to potentially involve other criminals who might see me as a threat. Sophia, I'm not running away from my own home because of Derek's associates. This isn't about running away. This is about being smart. Being smart is exactly what got us to this point. I gestured toward the FBI team currently dismantling my guest room. If I'd been less smart, Derek would have succeeded in stealing my house and probably killing me. That's not exactly reassuring. Agent Kim approached us from the house, carrying a laptop bag and wearing an expression I'd learned to recognize as significant news. Mrs. Whitmore, we need to discuss what we found in Derek's hidden files. More evidence of fraud. Evidence of something much bigger than fraud. She sat down at my patio table and opened the laptop. Derek wasn't just running investment scams. He was part of an organized network that specifically targets affluent women for what they call asset liberation. Asset liberation. Systematic theft through relationship manipulation. They identify women with valuable assets, research their personal lives and vulnerabilities, then assign operatives to establish romantic or family relationships to gain access. Sophia looked sick. You're saying Derek was assigned to target my mother? We're saying Derek didn't meet you by accident, Mrs. Castellaniano. You were selected because of your relationship to your mother and her property holdings. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. How long have they been watching me? According to these files, your property was identified as a target 18 months ago. Derek spent 6 months researching your family relationships before approaching your daughter. Sophia was staring at Agent Kim with growing horror. Everything about our relationship was planned. The coffee shop where you met, the activities you enjoyed together, even his interest in your hobbies. It was all carefully orchestrated based on psychological profiles they'd developed. Psychological profiles, I repeated. Agent Kim turned the laptop screen toward us. They have detailed assessments of your personality, your financial habits, your relationship with your daughter, even your daily routine. Derek knew exactly how to manipulate both of you. I looked at the screen and saw a file labeled Patricia Whitmore Target Assessment. Below it were subfiles, financial assets, psychological vulnerabilities, social connections, and something called elimination protocols. What are elimination protocols? I asked, though I suspected I didn't want to know. Contingency plans for what to do if a target becomes problematic. In your case, they had 3 options: discreditation, incapacitation, or termination. Termination, Sophia whispered. They were planning to kill her only if the other methods failed. But Mrs. Whitmore's resistance to Derek's initial approach triggered their escalation procedures. I thought about Derek standing in my kitchen with a gun, calmly explaining that eliminating me would collapse the federal case against him. It hadn't been a desperate decision. It had been a calculated business strategy. Agent Kim, how many other women are currently being targeted by this network? Based on what we've found so far, at least 30 active operations across 12 states, 30 women who don't know they are being systematically manipulated by professional criminals. Exactly. I stood up and walked to my deck railing, looking out at the ocean that had been my sanctuary for 5 years. The waves were exactly the same as they'd been yesterday, but everything else felt different now. What happens next? I asked. Derek has agreed to cooperate with our investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's providing information about the network's operations, leadership structure, and other targets. And the other women, we're working to identify and protect them. But Mrs. Whitmore, your case is crucial to our prosecution strategy. You're the only target who recognized the scam and documented it thoroughly enough to build a federal case. Which means you'll need to testify in multiple trials potentially over the next 2 years, and you'll need to remain available and protected during that entire period. Sophia stood up abruptly. 2 years? Mom, you can't live under federal protection for 2 years. Actually, Agent Kim said, we have a proposal that might interest both of you. She explained that the FBI was developing a task force specifically to combat romance and family relationship fraud targeting older adults. They needed someone with my experience and analytical skills to help identify other operations and train agents to recognize the warning signs. You want me to become a federal consultant? We want you to help us stop other women from going through what you experienced and what Elena Patterson and Jennifer Walsh experienced. I thought about Elena's frightened voice on the phone, about Jennifer's destroyed business, about the 30 women currently being manipulated by criminals who'd studied their psychological vulnerabilities. What would that involve? Training sessions with agents and victims, reviewing case files to identify patterns, and occasionally serving as an undercover consultant when we encounter sophisticated operations. Undercover women like yourself who've survived these attacks are uniquely qualified to help other targets recognize the warning signs. Sometimes the best way to break up an operation is to have someone with your experience approach the target directly. Sophia was shaking her head. Mom, this sounds incredibly dangerous. More dangerous than pretending these networks don't exist. I looked at her. Sophia, Derek fooled you completely. He fooled Jennifer Walsh. He fooled Elena Patterson and at least 12 other women. But he didn't fool me because you were suspicious of him from the beginning, because I'd learned to trust my own judgment over other people's charm. I turned back to Agent Kim. What kind of protection would be provided for these undercover operations? Full surveillance, backup teams, and extraction protocols. You'd never be in actual danger. Just like Derek's arrest was supposed to be completely safe, Agent Kim had the grace to look embarrassed. That operation had complications we didn't anticipate, but we've learned from those mistakes. I spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about Agent Kim's proposal. The idea of helping other women avoid Derek's type of manipulation was appealing, but the reality of putting myself in potentially dangerous situations was sobering. That evening, while Sophia made dinner, I called Jennifer Walsh. Patricia, how are you holding up after everything that happened? I'm okay, Jennifer, but I wanted to ask you something. If you'd had someone to warn you about Derek's methods before he destroyed your business, would that have made a difference? Absolutely. If I'd known what to look for, I never would have trusted him with my company, even if that someone had to put themselves at risk to reach you. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Are you thinking about working with the FBI? I'm thinking about making sure Derek's network doesn't destroy any more lives. Then I think you should do it. And I think you should know that I'm planning to do it, too. After I hung up, I found Sophia sitting on the deck with 2 glasses of wine. Mom, I need to tell you something, she said as I joined her. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, about how Derek manipulated both of us, about how I let him treat you. Sophia, let me finish. I've spent my whole adult life looking for someone else to make me feel important, valuable, worth something. Derek was just the latest in a long line of people I thought would complete me. And now I think maybe I need to learn how to complete myself first. She took a sip of wine. I want to help with this FBI task force thing. Sophia, you don't have the experience. I have different experience. I know what it feels like to be manipulated by someone like Derek. I know how they make you feel special and important while they're actually using you. She looked at me directly. Maybe there are other women out there who need to hear from someone who fell for it completely before they learned to see through it. As I sat there watching the sunset with my daughter, I realized that Derek's biggest mistake hadn't been underestimating me. It had been bringing us together in a way that forced us both to become stronger than we'd ever been apart. Tomorrow, I would call Agent Kim and accept her proposal. But tonight, I was just going to enjoy the fact that my daughter had finally figured out the difference between being used and being valued. Derek's network had no idea what was coming for them. 6 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, pretending to read a romance novel while watching a woman named Carol Peterson unknowingly have lunch with the man who was planning to steal her house. His name was Marcus Webb, and according to FBI intelligence, he was Derek's former partner and the current operational leader of what the task force had dubbed the Heartbreak Network. Carol was a 58-year-old widow who'd inherited a successful bed and breakfast from her late husband, and Marcus had been courting her for 3 months. Patricia, can you see the subject clearly? Agent Chen's voice came through the nearly invisible earpiece I was wearing. I can see both of them, I murmured into the microphone hidden in my book jacket. Marcus is showing her some kind of financial documents. That's the property management proposal. He's about to suggest that she needs professional help running her business. I watched Marcus lean forward with the same practiced sincerity I'd seen Derek use in my kitchen. Carol was nodding, clearly flattered by his attention and concern for her welfare. Patricia, we need you to make contact now. You too. Carol's about to sign preliminary documents. I closed my book and walked to their table, channeling every ounce of confused elderly woman I could manage. Excuse me, I said to Carol. Aren't you Carol Peterson? We met at the grief support group in Salem. Carol looked up, clearly confused. I'm sorry, I don't think we've met. Oh my goodness. You look so much like a woman I met who was dealing with the same situation I went through. I glanced at Marcus, who was studying me with interest. A charming man convinced her to let him manage her late husband's business assets, and it turned out he was stealing everything. I'm sorry, Marcus said smoothly, but we're having a private business meeting. Of course. I started to turn away, then stopped. Carol, you said your name was Carol, right? Just be careful about anyone who approaches you with investment advice too soon after a loss. These predators specifically target widows who own valuable property. Marcus's voice had an edge. Now, you're interrupting our conversation with inappropriate paranoia. Oh, you're probably right. I smiled at him with the sweet confusion of someone easily dismissed. I'm sure you're nothing like Derek Castellano. Marcus went completely still. Who? Derek Castellano. He used the same approach. Charming, helpful, very concerned about proper asset management. Of course, he's in federal prison now for elder fraud. Carol was looking back and forth between us. Marcus, do you know this man she's talking about? I've never heard that name before, Marcus said, but his eyes never left my face. Oh, well, you probably wouldn't have. It was quite a scandal, though. He was part of some criminal network that targeted women with valuable real estate. They'd research your property, your family situation, your psychological profile, then send someone to manipulate you into signing over control of your assets. That sounds terrible, Carol said. And I could hear the first note of doubt in her voice. It was, "Poor Eleanor Patterson lost her entire family home and Jennifer Walsh lost her business." I looked directly at Marcus, though I suppose you'd know more about Jennifer Walsh than I would. Marcus stood up abruptly. "Carol, we should continue this conversation elsewhere." "Actually," I said, sitting down in his vacant chair, "I think Carol should hear about the investigation before she signs anything." "What investigation?" Carol asked. "The FBI task force that's currently tracking at least 12 active operations targeting widows with valuable property. They have quite a sophisticated network, detailed psychological profiles, backup stories, even fake references." Marcus was edging away from the table. "Carol, this woman is clearly unstable. I think we should sit down, Marcus." Agent Chen appeared behind him, her badge visible. FBI Financial Crimes Task Force. The arrest went smoothly after that. Marcus had enough outstanding warrants that he couldn't fight extradition, and the documents in his briefcase provided evidence linking him to at least 6 other ongoing cases. "Carol," I said as Agent Chen led Marcus away, "you should know that you were never in any real danger. We've been watching this operation for months. You're with the FBI. I'm a consultant, someone who survived the same type of attack you were about to experience." Carol stared at the papers Marcus had tried to get her to sign. "I was really going to sign these, wasn't I?" "Probably. Marcus is very good at what he does, but now he won't be doing it anymore." That evening, I called Sophia from my hotel room in Portland. "How did it go, Mom?" "We prevented another victim and arrested a major player in Derek's network." "I'd call that a successful day. How many does that make now?" 14 prevented thefts, 7 major arrests, and about $2 million in recovered assets returned to victims." "And how many more operations are still active?" "Too many," I admitted, "but fewer every month." Sophia was quiet. For a moment. "Mom, do you ever regret getting involved in all this? You could have just stayed home and let Derek face justice without turning this into your life's work." I thought about Carol Peterson, who would go home tonight to her bed and breakfast instead of signing documents that would have eventually left her homeless. I thought about Eleanor Patterson, whose house had been saved from foreclosure with recovered assets from Derek's offshore accounts. I thought about the 37 women who were currently living peacefully in their own homes because someone had warned them before it was too late. "Sophia, do you remember when Derek first suggested I needed help managing my life?" "Unfortunately, yes. I realized something that day. The world is full of people who assume that women like me are helpless, confused, and grateful for male guidance. Derek was just the criminal version of an attitude that's everywhere. And now I spend my time proving that we're not helpless, we're not confused, and we definitely don't need guidance from men who see our independence as a problem to be solved, even when it's dangerous. Especially when it's dangerous." 2 days later, I was back home on my deck in Malibu, watching the waves and reading case files for the next operation. Agent Kim was arriving tomorrow to brief me on a new network operating out of Phoenix, and Sophia was driving down from Los Angeles to spend the weekend. My phone rang and I recognized the number as Jennifer Walsh. "Patricia, I wanted to give you an update on the Seattle operation." "How did it go?" "We prevented 3 more victims and identified a connection to that Miami case you wiped last month. This network is even bigger than we originally thought." "Good work, Jennifer. How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected. There's something satisfying about using Derek's own methods against his associates." After we hung up, I sat in the gathering twilight, thinking about the path that had brought me here. A year ago, I'd been a woman enjoying peaceful retirement in her beach house. Now, I was a federal consultant who spent her time protecting other women from sophisticated criminals. Derek had been right about one thing. His arrest hadn't been the end of anything. It had been the beginning of a task force that had become a model for other states, the beginning of partnerships with victim advocacy groups and elder protection agencies, the beginning of congressional hearings about romance fraud and legislative changes to strengthen prosecution tools. But most importantly, it had been the beginning of something Derek could never have anticipated. a network of women who refuse to be victims. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Mom, just past the exit for your house. Can't wait to hear about Portland. Also, Agent Kim called. They want us both for the Phoenix operation. Are you up for another adventure? I typed back, always, as I prepared for bed that night in my house, my safe, secure, protected house that no one would ever take from me. I thought about Derek in his federal prison cell. He'd spent his career assuming that women like me were easy targets, isolated and vulnerable. He'd been wrong about the isolated part, too. Tomorrow, Sophia and I would start planning how to dismantle another criminal network. Next week, Jennifer Walsh and I would testify at a congressional hearing about romance fraud. Next month, I'd train a new group of FBI agents to recognize the psychological manipulation tactics used by relationship predators. Derek had tried to steal my home. Instead, he'd given me a purpose that was bigger than any house, more valuable than any bank account, and more satisfying than any peaceful retirement could have been. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's becoming exactly what your enemies never expected you to become. And what Derek had never expected was that this helpless, middle-aged woman would become the kind of person who made sure that criminals like him never succeeded again. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.
Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon. Thanks for watching.